70 men waited in a field outside Kyoto for one man to arrive. He was already there. He had been lying in the grass above them for hours, watching them get ready. Tonight, I'll tell you a story from Japan. It begins with a letter. Polite, correct, and signed with a child's name. The grass was wet and cold, and Musashi lay down in it and did not move. Below him, the hillside dropped away to a road, and the road bent past a single old pine tree. It was still dark. Nothing had happened yet. Then, far down the road, a light appeared, then another beside it, then more, strung out along the road like beads on a string, all of them coming up toward the pine. He began to count them. He counted the torches first, and then he counted the shapes walking between them. Spears, longbows, swords at the hip, and men carrying nothing at all, which meant they were carrying something they did not want seen yet. The letter had named one opponent, one boy from the Yoshioka house, one place, 1 hour before dawn. Musashi lay in the grass above them and counted past 50 and then stopped counting. Because past 50 the number did not change anything. The Yoshioka were not bandits. They were the most respected sword school in Kyoto. Teachers to the shogun's family. A name people said carefully in a lower voice, the way you say the names of old houses. They had a hall and students and a reputation older than anyone living inside it. Musashi was 21. He had no school, no lord, and no money. His hair was a mess. When he first came to their gate and asked for a match, they very nearly laughed at him. Twice, the Yoshioka sent a brother out to meet him in a field outside the city. Twice it was finished faster than the people watching had expected. The first one, Seijuro, walked out to that field as the head of the house and was carried back from it. The second one, Denchichiro, came for the first one and did not come back at all. Musashi said very little afterwards either time. He never seemed to enjoy it. But a house had lost 2 brothers in a single season, and no house survives that quietly. So they wrote to him a 3rd time. The letter was polite, correct in every line. It gave a place, a pine tree on the road at Ichijoji, in the fields northeast of the city, and it gave an hour before dawn. And it gave the name of the man who would be waiting there. Matashi Chiro, the last of the brothers. Musashi read that name twice and understood exactly what it was. Matashi Chiro was a boy, a child in a grown man's armor, holding up a family name with both hands. The evening before, Musashi walked out to Ichijoji by himself and stood there looking at it for a long time. The pine stood where the road ran out into open fields. On one side, rice paddies, cut into long strips with narrow banks of earth between them. On the other, the hill, thick with trees, climbing away toward the mountains. He walked the banks. He found the places where 2 men could stand side by side, and the places where only one could. He looked at the sky and worked out where the light would come from. Then he went back and slept. Everyone in Kyoto knew one thing about him. He came late. He had left men standing in the sun until their hands went loose on their sword hilts, and then finished them in a single pass. It had happened twice. By now it was almost a joke. That is why nobody was looking at the hill. They had come out early to wait for a man who was always late. And he was already there, above them, lying flat in the wet grass, watching them arrive. Waiting is the part nobody tells you about. The cold came up out of the ground and through his clothes. His fingers stiffened, and he opened and closed them slowly, one hand and then the other. Water moved somewhere below him in the paddies. He kept his breathing long and quiet because breath is the first thing that gives a man away in the dark, and he still had a long time left to wait. They arrived and spread out along the road, and Musashi watched them arrange themselves. Bowmen first, out on the far bank, where they had a clean line down the length of the road. Then swordsmen, in a loose half-circle, every one of them turned toward the way he would come. And in the middle of it, under the pine tree, the boy, small inside his armor, standing very straight. Every man in that field was watching the road. Nobody looked up the hill. Musashi stood up. He had been lying still so long that standing hurt. The wet grass fell away from him. His knees ached. Nobody turned around. For one more breath, 70 men went on carefully watching an empty road. Then he was coming down the slope, fast, the ground dropping away under his feet and the trees going past on both sides of him. He did not shout. That is the strange part. He came down out of the dark in silence. The boy under the pine heard something behind him and began to turn. He was still turning when it happened. One cut. It was finished before the men standing beside him understood that it had begun. For a moment, nothing moved at all. 70 men stood in a dark field and looked at a shape on the ground under a pine tree, and none of them made a sound. Then all of them made a sound at once. Musashi drew the second sword. Long blade in the right hand, short blade in the left. A way of holding them that no school in Kyoto taught, and that people would still be arguing about 400 years later. An arrow went past his ear, close enough to hear it go. He did not look for the bowman. He looked at the ground and chose where to put his feet. He went for the paddies. Off the road, down the bank, out onto the narrow strip of earth that ran between the flooded fields. Black water on both sides of him now, flat and still. On that path, 70 men could not reach him. 2 could. The rest had to stand behind and wait their turn. And men waiting their turn in the dark are not fighting. They are thinking. So it became a small thing. A narrow bank, a few feet of earth, and whoever was standing on it. One man came at him, and Musashi let him come one step further than he wanted to. Another followed too close behind the first, and found he had nowhere to put his feet. Distance, footing, breath. He was not thinking about courage or about the House of Yoshioka. He was thinking about how far away a man's hands were, and how much room was left behind his own heels. But they were not stupid, and they were not few. Out along the far bank, torches began sliding sideways in the dark. They were going around him. In another minute there would be men behind him on the same narrow path, and the path that had been keeping him alive would close at both ends. He heard it before he saw it, and he stopped thinking about the men in front of him. He broke out sideways off the bank, straight down into the flooded field. Water to the shin, then to the knee, mud pulling at him with every step, arrows going into the water around him with a sound like stones dropped into a well. A man came at him out of the dark, and it was very quick, and then Musashi was past him, out the far side, up onto hard ground and running in among the lanes of a sleeping village, where the walls stood close and the roofs hung low and a bow was worth nothing at all. Somewhere back in that field, something had opened his sleeve. He noticed it here, the way you notice these things afterwards. A warm weight running down his left arm, and a hand that closed slower than it should have. He did not stop to look at it. He moved the short sword to a better grip and kept going. He did not run straight. Straight is where they would look. He went left where a wall ended and left again along a ditch, and up into a stand of bamboo on the slope, and stopped there with his back against it. Below him, voices spread out through the village, calling to each other, angry at first, then further away, then uncertain, then nothing. He stayed in the bamboo a long time after the last voice was gone, listening to his own breathing slow down. Somewhere a bird started. Then another one answered it. That was how he knew it was over. Not by anything the men did, by the birds beginning again. The sky turned gray behind the mountains and Musashi sat down. He cleaned the long blade first, slowly, with a piece of cloth, the way you do a thing you have already done 1,000 times. His hands were not quite steady, and he watched them until they were. He had won. He was 21 years old, and he was alive, and he had won. He sat there on the wet ground in the first light and thought about a boy standing very straight under a pine tree. He left Kyoto not long after that. The Yoshioka name faded out of the city within a generation, and the road at Ichijoji went back to being a road. Musashi went on. More matches, more years, more roads, and no school of his own for a very long time. And when he was old, sitting in a cave, he wrote a book about the way of the sword. In all of it, that night at the pine tree gets a few plain lines. He never wrote down what it cost him. The pine at Ichijoji is still there. Not the same tree, but a tree in the same place, on a quiet corner in the northeast of Kyoto. There is a stone marker beside it. Students ride past on bicycles without looking up. A place like that is not really kept for the fighting that happened there. It is kept because a man stood in that spot once and had to decide something quickly, in the dark, with no time to be sure. And the place stays, long after everyone has stopped agreeing about what he decided. I keep thinking about the boy under the pine tree. Musashi went for him first, before anyone else, and I understand why. And I still don't quite know what to do with that. I'm not sure I know what winning means on a night like that one. I wonder what you think. Good night.